The galaxy had known fear for 3,000 years. It had a name, it had a shape, it walked on 8 powerful limbs and stood 3 meters tall. It was called the Vorak, and every species that had ever encountered them learned the same lesson: submit or die. The Vorak dominion stretched across 400 star systems. Their warships darkened the skies of 1,000 conquered worlds. Their soldiers had never known defeat in ground combat. Their very biology seemed designed for conquest. They came from Vorak Prime, a nightmare world of crushing gravity and poisonous air, where only the strongest survived long enough to breed. Evolution had shaped them into perfect killing machines. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. Their 8 limbs could tear through metal. Their eyes could see in complete darkness. Their lungs could breathe atmospheres that would kill most species in seconds. But it was not just their bodies that made them terrifying. It was their culture. The Vorak believed in one simple truth: the strong existed to rule, and the weak existed to serve. They had built an empire on this principle. Every species they encountered faced the same choice: bow down and become tribute states, giving up resources and lives to feed the Dominion's endless hunger, or fight and be destroyed completely. Their worlds burned to ash, their people erased from history. No one had ever chosen the third option. No one had ever won. The Galactic Council existed in the shadow of this truth. 47 species sat on the council, and all of them paid tribute to the Vorak. Some gave minerals and metals. Some gave food and water. Some gave their own people, workers and soldiers, to serve the Dominion's needs. The council pretended to govern, pretended to make decisions, but everyone knew the truth. They were allowed to exist because the Vorak found it useful. Nothing more. Supreme Commander Caltharak the Unbroken stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched the stars pass by. He had earned his title through 500 years of warfare. He had led the conquest of the Pelion Confederacy. He had crushed the Morthian Rebellion. He had personally killed the last king of the Draven people with his own limbs. In all his centuries of life, he had never lost a battle. He had never even come close. He was growing bored. The galaxy had been tamed. The tribute flowed. The subject species knew their place. There were no more challenges, no more worthy enemies to test himself against. Caltharak sometimes wondered if this was what his ancestors had feared when they first left Vorak Prime. Not that they would be defeated, but that they would succeed so completely that there would be nothing left to conquer. Then the signal came. Supreme Commander, his sensor officer reported, "We have detected an unregistered vessel. It appears to be a probe of some kind. Simple design, no weapons. It is transmitting a signal on multiple frequencies." Caltharak's interest stirred slightly. Origin: unknown, Supreme Commander. The probe came from an unexplored region, Sector 447. Our surveys marked it as empty. Empty. The Vorak had surveyed most of the galaxy over the centuries, cataloging worlds and species for eventual conquest, but some regions remained unexplored, considered too remote or too resource-poor to be worth the effort. Sector 447 was one of these forgotten corners. "Capture the probe," Caltharak ordered. "I want to know everything about it." The probe was small, barely larger than a Vorak warrior's torso. It was made of simple metals and primitive electronics. The Vorak scientists examined it with growing confusion. The technology was crude by galactic standards, barely capable of interstellar travel, but there was something odd about its design, something that did not quite fit the pattern of other primitive species. "There are messages encoded in the transmission," the lead scientist reported. "Greetings in mathematical language. Images of the species that created it. Star charts showing its origin point." "Show me the creators," Caltharak commanded. The images appeared on the main screen. Caltharak felt a rumble of amusement building in his chest. The creatures were tiny, barely a third of Vorak height. They stood on 2 legs, balanced precariously on flat feet. They had no armor, no claws, no natural weapons of any kind. Their skin looked soft and easily torn. Their eyes were small and forward-facing like prey animals. "These things built a starship?" one of his officers asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "Apparently so," Caltharak replied. "Look at them. They are practically asking to be conquered. Soft, weak, fragile. They will make excellent servants once we break them." He gave the order to trace the probe's trajectory back to its source. It took only a few days to locate the small yellow star and the blue-green world orbiting it. Long-range scans revealed a species that had only recently developed space travel. They had colonized their moon and were building stations in orbit. Primitive electromagnetic transmissions filled the space around their world, a constant chatter of communication. "They call themselves humans," the science officer reported after analyzing the transmissions. "Their world is called Earth. They appear to have nation-state separate governments that sometimes cooperate and sometimes conflict. They have only had space capability for approximately 200 of their years." "Population?" Caltharak asked. "Approximately 10 billion on the homeworld. Small colonies elsewhere in their system. 10 billion. A good harvest." The Vorak always needed more workers, more soldiers, more resources. This Earth would provide well, and these humans, so soft and weak, would learn quickly to serve their new masters. Caltharak opened a channel to the Dominion Council. I am mobilizing my fleet toward Sector 447. We have found a new species for conquest. They call themselves humans. I expect minimal resistance. The news spread through the galaxy within hours. The Galactic Council received the report and reacted with the usual mixture of emotions: relief that the Vorak had found a new target, someone else to suffer their attention, pity for the unfortunate species about to be crushed, and underneath it all the quiet shame of those who knew they could do nothing to help. Ambassador Threll of the Pelia stood in the council chamber and listened to the murmurs around her. Her species had been conquered 300 years ago. She still remembered the stories her grandmother had told. Of the day the Vorak ships had filled the sky, of the choice they had been given: submit or die. The Pelians had chosen to submit. They had lost their freedom, their pride, and a quarter of their population in the conquest. But they had survived. Another species to join our ranks. Someone whispered nearby. I wonder how many of them will be left when the Vorak are done. Threll said nothing. There was nothing to say. The humans had no idea what was coming, and when they found out, it would already be too late. The Vorak armada assembled in deep space. 2,000 warships forming into the conquest formation that had broken 100 worlds. Calthrak stood at the center of his bridge and watched his fleet take shape around him. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, built from the strongest alloys, armed with weapons that could crack planets. The warriors aboard numbered in the millions, each one worth 10 soldiers of any other species. This conquest would be easy, almost disappointingly so, but Caltharic would do his duty to the Dominion. He would add Earth to the map of conquered worlds. He would break these humans and teach them their place in the galaxy. Set course for the Sol system, he commanded. Standard conquest approach. We will offer them the choice. Most likely they will refuse at first. They usually do. Then we will demonstrate our power, and they will learn wisdom. The fleet moved as one, 2,000 ships entering hyperspace in perfect formation. The journey would take 3 standard days. 3 days until the humans met their destiny. On Earth, the humans were not entirely unaware. Their satellites detected the strange energy signatures of hyperspace travel. Their astronomers calculated their scientists studied the readings with growing concern. In a secure facility deep beneath a mountain, generals and scientists gathered around a table covered with data. They're coming, someone said. Whatever they are, they're coming here. 3 days, maybe less. The room fell silent. They had always known this moment would come. They had hoped for more time. But humanity had never been a species that gave up easily. Activate Protocol Prometheus, the lead general said. It's time to show the galaxy what we really are. Far above the Earth, hidden beneath civilian satellites and space stations, systems that had been dormant for decades began to wake. Ships that officially did not exist powered up their engines. Weapons that no government had ever acknowledged began their targeting sequences. The Vorak were coming. They expected to find a soft, weak, primitive species. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, 2,000 ships arranged in perfect formation. Calthrak looked at the display showing the small blue world in the distance. So fragile, so vulnerable. To begin standard approach, he ordered. Broadcast the conquest terms on all frequencies. Let them know their gods have arrived. The message went out across space. The same words the Vorak had spoken to 100 conquered species. Surrender your world. Surrender your resources. Surrender your people. Accept your place as servants of the Dominion, or be destroyed. Calthrak. The human shuttle was absurdly small compared to Vorak vessels. It approached the eternal conquest like an insect flying toward a mountain. Tiny and fragile and seemingly lost in the vast darkness of space, Calthrak watched its approach with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. These humans had surprised him with their calm response. He wondered if they were simply too primitive to understand the danger they faced, or if there was something else behind their composure. The shuttle docked in the secondary hangar bay. Calthrak had ordered a full honor guard to receive the humans, not out of respect but to intimidate. 50 Vorak warriors stood in perfect formation, each one towering over 3 meters tall, their natural armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Their 8 limbs were folded in the formal rest position, but everyone knew how quickly those limbs could unfold into weapons of destruction. The shuttle's door opened, and the humans stepped out. They were even smaller than Calthrak had expected. The tallest among them barely reached the chest of the shortest Vorak warrior. They wore simple clothing, dark suits that seemed designed for function rather than display. They carried no visible weapons, no armor, nothing that could possibly protect them from Vorak's strength. There were 5 of them. 4 stood in a protective formation around the 5th, a woman of middle years with black hair streaked with gray. She walked with the calm confidence of someone who had no fear, and that alone was enough to make Calthrak pay attention. He had seen that walk before, on warriors who had earned their courage through blood and fire. What had this tiny, fragile creature done to earn such confidence? I am Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the woman said, her voice clear and steady. A translation device rendered her words into Vorak language. Thank you for receiving us, Supreme Commander. Calthrak studied her for a long moment. Her eyes met his without flinching. That was unusual. Most species could not even look at a Vorak without trembling. Something about the predator instinct. The millions of years of evolution that told prey animals to run from anything with so many limbs and so many teeth. But this human looked at him like he was just another person in a meeting, like he was not the most dangerous being she had ever encountered. Either she was brave beyond all reason, or she was too foolish to understand her situation. You requested this meeting, Calthrak rumbled. Speak your terms, though I warn you, the Dominion's terms are not negotiable. Dr. Tanaka nodded slightly. I understand your position, Supreme Commander. The Vorak Dominion has conquered many species. Your terms are well known throughout the galaxy. Submission, tribute, and what you call culling rights. The right to take members of subject species for any purpose the Dominion sees fit. You are well informed for a species that has just made first contact. We have been listening for a long time. Dr. Tanaka said, we detected signs of galactic civilization decades ago. We have been preparing for this moment. That caught Caltharak's attention. Most primitive species stumbled into galactic society by accident, shocked and unprepared for what they found, but these humans claimed to have been watching and preparing. It was probably a bluff, an attempt to appear stronger than they were, but it was an interesting bluff. Preparing how? He asked. That is something I hope we will not need to demonstrate. Dr. Tanaka replied, I am here to propose an alternative to your standard terms, mutual trade relationships, cultural exchange. Humanity has much to offer the galaxy, and we believe we could be valuable partners rather than subjects. The Vorak officers behind Caltharak made sounds of disbelief. A few of them laughed outright, the deep rumbling sound that their species made when something amused them. Partners, this tiny soft species wanted to be partners with the Dominion. Caltharak did not laugh. He was too experienced for that. He had learned long ago that confidence in an enemy should always be investigated before being dismissed. But he also knew what his duty was, what the Dominion expected from him. Your proposal is rejected, he said flatly. The Dominion does not make partnerships with lesser species. You will submit, or you will be destroyed. Those are the only options available to you. Dr. Tanaka showed no reaction to his words. Her face remained calm, her posture relaxed. I understand that you feel this way, but I must ask you to reconsider. Humanity does not wish for conflict. We have studied your history, your conquests, your methods. We know what you have done to other species. We do not want that for our people. Then you will submit. No, Dr. Tanaka said simply. We will not. The word hung in the air. Such a small word, such an impossible word. No species had ever said it to the Vorak and survived. Caltharak felt a strange emotion stirring in his chest, something he had not felt in centuries. Was it anger, or was it something else? Something almost like interest. You do not understand your situation, he said, leaning forward slightly. His massive form loomed over the tiny human, casting a shadow that engulfed her completely. I have 2,000 warships in your system. Each one carries enough firepower to devastate a continent. My warriors number in the millions. Your entire species could not stand against us for a single day. Dr. Tanaka looked up at him. She did not step back. She did not tremble. She simply looked at him with those small, strange eyes. And Caltharak had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing something he was not. Supreme Commander, she said quietly, I must tell you something that I hope you will consider carefully. We have studied the Vor. We know your strengths, your physical power, your natural armor, your ferocity in combat. These are formidable qualities. But we also know your weaknesses. We have no weaknesses, Caltharak growled. Every species has weaknesses, even mine, especially mine. Humans are small and soft. We have no natural weapons, no armor. In a direct physical confrontation with a Vorak warrior, any one of us would die in seconds. She paused. But we have other qualities. We are very good at finding weaknesses, and we are very, very good at surviving. The room fell silent. Caltharak stared at the tiny creature before him, trying to understand what he was seeing. Was this a threat? It almost sounded like one. But how could something so small and fragile threaten the Dominion? You have one rotation of your planet to reconsider, he said finally. When that time ends, if you have not submitted, we will begin the conquest. And I promise you, Dr. Tanaka, we will not be gentle. The human woman bowed her head slightly. I understand. I will convey your terms to my government. But I must tell you honestly, Supreme Commander, we will not submit. Whatever comes next, please know that we tried to find another way. She turned and walked back to her shuttle, her 4 companions falling in around her. Caltharak watched them go, his mind working through what had just happened. Something felt wrong. Something felt different about this conquest. These humans were not reacting the way subject species were supposed to react. He dismissed the feeling. It did not matter. In one planetary rotation, he would begin the bombardment. These soft, fragile creatures would learn the same lesson that 100 species had learned before them. The strong ruled, the weak served. That was the way of the galaxy. Back on Earth, Dr. Tanaka's shuttle landed at the Central Command Facility. She was met by a crowd of officials, military leaders and scientists, all of them anxious to hear what had happened. They refused. she reported as she walked quickly toward the command center. As we expected, they gave us one day, then we proceed with Prometheus, General Chen said. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes, the kind of person who had spent a lifetime preparing for exactly this situation. We proceed, Dr. Tanaka confirmed. Get me a channel to all the fleet commanders. It's time. The command center was a massive room filled with screens and consoles, hundreds of people working in coordinated precision. On the main display, the positions of the Vorak fleet were clearly marked. 2,000 red dots arranged in their conquest formation. Around them, seemingly empty space. Seemingly empty. All fleet commanders, this is Dr. Tanaka. You are cleared to activate. Across the solar system, the ships that had been hidden in the asteroid belt, behind moons, in the shadow of planets, began to reveal themselves. These were not the primitive vessels that humanity had shown to the galaxy. These were something else entirely. For 60 years, ever since humanity had first detected signs of alien civilization, they had been building in secret. They had studied every scrap of information they could gather about galactic technology. They had reverse-engineered pieces of debris from ancient battles, recovered from the edges of the solar system. They had developed their own innovations, technologies that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The ships that now appeared on Vorak sensors were smaller than Vorak warships, but there were many of them, thousands of them, and they moved in patterns that no Vorak tactical officer had ever encountered, swirling and dancing through space like a flock of birds, or a school of fish, or something else entirely. On the Eternal Conquest, Kelthorak watched the new readings appear on his display. His confident expression flickered for just a moment. What is this? He demanded. Unknown vessels, Supreme Commander, human design, but their capabilities. We are having difficulty analyzing them. They appear to have some kind of stealth technology. They were not visible until they activated. How many? There was a pause. A long pause. The Vorak had conquered 100 species. They had fought in thousands of battles across hundreds of worlds. Their tactical doctrines had been refined over 3,000 years of warfare. They knew every trick, every strategy, every desperate gambit that a doomed species might attempt. Or so they believed. What the humans did next was something they had never seen. The human fleet did not attack in formation. It did not form battle lines or concentrate firepower on key targets. Instead, the 12,000 ships scattered like seeds in the wind, spreading across the entire solar system in what seemed like complete chaos. They moved in groups of 3 or 4, darting between asteroids, using the gravity of planets to slingshot themselves in unexpected directions, appearing and disappearing from Vorak sensors like ghosts. What are they doing? One of Kelthorak's officers demanded. This is not a military formation. This is madness. Kelthorak said nothing. He was watching the patterns, trying to understand what he was seeing. There was something there, something beneath the apparent chaos, a kind of order that his mind could not quite grasp. They are probing us, he realized, testing our defenses, seeing how we react. Should we pursue them, Supreme Commander? It was the obvious response. When an enemy scattered, you chased them down and destroyed them one by one. But something held Kelthorak back, a warning instinct, developed over centuries of combat. No, he said, hold formation, let them come to us. They cannot defeat us with tricks alone. Eventually, they will have to fight. For 6 hours, the human ships danced around the Vorak fleet. They made feinting runs, approaching just close enough to trigger defensive responses before veering away. They fired occasional shots, testing Vorak shields, never committing to a real attack. It was infuriating. It was also, Kelthorak had to admit, tactically brilliant. His crews were getting tired. Their attention was fragmenting, constantly shifting to track dozens of different threats. The conquest formation, designed for overwhelming frontal assault, was useless against an enemy that refused to stand and fight. And every hour that passed, the humans were learning how Vorak ships moved, learning how their shields recharged, learning where their sensors had blind spots. Enough of this, Kelthorak finally growled. All ships advance on the human homeworld. If they will not come to us, we will force their hand. Begin the approach to Earth. The Vorak fleet moved as one, 2,000 warships accelerating toward the blue planet. The human ships responded immediately, converging from all directions. But instead of attacking head-on, they formed into a strange configuration. A loose sphere surrounding the Vorak fleet on all sides. They are trying to encircle us, an officer reported. Standard encirclement tactics. Our rearguard will handle any attacks from behind. But it was not standard. As the first wave of human ships came into weapons range, they did something unprecedented. They attacked in perfect synchronization, hundreds of ships firing at exactly the same moment. All of their weapons focused on a single point in the Vorak formation. The targeted ship was a heavy cruiser, one of the strongest vessels in the fleet. Its shields flared under the concentrated assault, energy levels spiking beyond anything Vorak engineers had thought possible. For a moment it held, then the shields collapsed, and 100 human weapons struck the hull simultaneously. The cruiser exploded. Kelthorak stared at the display, unable to process what he had just seen. A Vorak heavy cruiser, destroyed in seconds. It was impossible. It should not have happened. How? He demanded. Our shields should have held against weapons that primitive. They coordinated their fire. Supreme Commander, every weapon hit within a fraction of a second. The combined energy exceeded our shield capacity. We have never seen coordination at that level. The humans had done it again. Another Vorak ship exploded, its shields overwhelmed by perfectly synchronized fire. Then another, and another. The battle became chaos. The human ships moved like a single organism, flowing around the Vorak fleet, striking where defenses were weakest, retreating before counterattacks could land. They never stayed still long enough to be targeted. They never made the same attack pattern twice. Every time Vorak's commanders thought they understood what the humans were doing, the humans did something completely different. Return fire. Kaltharak roared. All ships, weapons free. Destroy them. The Vorak fleet opened up with everything they had. Space lit up with the fury of 1,000 weapons, enough firepower to sterilize planets. Any other enemy would have been annihilated in seconds. The humans barely seemed to notice. Their ships dodged with impossible precision, slipping through gaps in the weapon fire that seemed too small to exist. When they could not dodge, they took hits on parts of their ships that could survive the damage. They sacrificed expendable components to protect critical systems. They used their own debris as cover, and they kept attacking, always attacking, never giving the Vorak a moment to regroup. 6 hours into the battle, Kelthrak received a report that made his blood run cold. Supreme Commander, we have lost approximately 600 vessels. The human losses appear to be minimal, perhaps 50 ships, 600 ships, a third of his fleet, more ships than the Vorak had lost in the last 500 years combined. And the humans had barely scratched for the first time in his long life. Kelthrak felt something he had never expected to feel. Real fear, not for himself, but for his people, for the Dominion, for everything he had spent his life building and protecting. Across the galaxy, others were watching. The Galactic Council had access to long-range sensors that could detect the energy signatures of major battles. When the first reports came in, most dismissed them as errors. The Vorak losing ships, impossible. The sensors must be malfunctioning. But the reports kept coming, and they kept getting worse. Ambassador Threll of the Pelia stood in the council chamber, watching the updates scroll across the main display. Her hearts were pounding so hard she thought they might burst from her chest. 600 Vorak ships destroyed. The number kept climbing. 700, 800. This cannot be real, someone whispered. It is real, another voice said. The humans are winning. The words seemed to echo through the chamber. The humans were winning. No one had ever won against a No one had ever come close. What are they? Someone asked. What kind of species could do this? No one had an answer. On the Eternal Conquest, Kaltharak made a decision that went against every instinct in his body. He ordered a tactical retreat. The Vorak fleet pulled back, trying to create distance from the swarming human ships, but retreat proved even more dangerous than attack. The humans pursued relentlessly, picking off damaged ships, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. By the end of the first day of battle, Kaltharak had lost half his fleet. 900 more Vorak ships drifted dead in space, their crews killed or captured. The humans had lost perhaps 200 vessels. We must call for reinforcements, his second-in-command said. The home fleet could be here in days. And what would I tell them? Kaltharak replied bitterly, that I was defeated by a species we considered primitive, that I need help to conquer a world we thought would fall in ours. You would tell them the truth, Supreme Commander, that we have encountered something new, something dangerous. Kaltharak turned to look at his officer. The younger Vorak was right. Pride was a luxury that dead warriors could not afford. Send a message, he said. Tell them everything. Tell them we have found a species unlike any we have ever faced. Tell them the humans are not prey, they are predators. The message went out across the stars, and everywhere it was received, it caused the same reaction. Shock, disbelief, and then, slowly, fear. The Vorak had always been the strongest. They had always been the rulers. They had always been safe. Now, for the first time in 3,000 years, they were not. And on Earth, humanity watched and waited. They had won the first battle, but they knew the war was just beginning. The Vorak would send more ships, more warriors. They would not accept defeat easily. Dr. Tanaka stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the aftermath of the battle. So many ships destroyed, so many lives lost, both human and Vorak. We have to end this, she said quietly. Not just win, end it, before more people die. How? General Chen asked. They will never surrender. Their culture does not allow it. Then we will have to change their culture, Dr. Tanaka replied. Show them something they have never seen. Give them a reason to become something new. She looked at the display, at the battered remains of the Vorak fleet, at the blue curve of Earth hanging in the darkness. They think strength means conquest, she said. We will have to teach them that there is another kind of strength, a better kind. The second phase of the battle was about to begin, and it would change everything. The second day of the Battle of Seoul began with silence. The Vorak fleet had pulled back to the outer edge of the solar system, licking its wounds, waiting for reinforcements that would take days to arrive. The humans had not pursued. They held their positions around Earth, their strange swirling formations never quite still, always ready. Calthrak stood alone in his private quarters, something he rarely did during a campaign. He was staring at a holographic display showing the tactical situation, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the nature of strength. For 3,000 years the Vorak had defined strength simply: physical power, military might, the ability to destroy those who opposed you. By that definition, the Vorak were the strongest species in the galaxy, and that strength gave them the right to rule. But these humans had shown him something different. They were physically weak, laughably so. A single Vorak warrior could tear a dozen humans apart with bare limbs. Yet somehow, they had just inflicted the worst defeat in Vorak history. Their strength was not in their bodies, it was in their minds, in their ability to think in ways the Vorak had never imagined, in their coordination, their creativity, their willingness to try things that no sane species would attempt. Was that also strength? And if it was, what did that mean for everything Calthrak had believed? A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. His second-in-command appeared on the screen. "Supreme Commander, we are detecting unusual activity from the human fleet." Calthrak moved to the bridge. On the tactical display, he could see what his officers were seeing. The human ships were moving again, but not in attack formation. They were spreading out, forming a vast web across the space between the Vorak position and Earth. "What are they doing now?" someone asked. The answer came moments later. A communication signal, broadcast on all frequencies, in perfect Vorak language. "Supreme Commander Calthrak," Dr. Tanaka's voice said, "I know you are receiving this. I want to offer you something that no one has ever offered the Vorak before. I want to offer you a choice." Calthrak gestured for his communications officer to open a response channel. "I am listening. You have seen what we can do," Dr. Tanaka continued. "You know now that conquering Earth will not be easy. Even if you call for reinforcements, even if you bring the full might of the Dominion, we will make you pay a price you cannot afford. But that is not what I want to talk about." "Then what do you want?" "I want to show you something, Supreme Commander. Something I think you need to see." The tactical display flickered, and suddenly new data appeared. Images, videos, records of battles that had taken place over the past day, but not from the human perspective, but from the Vorak perspective. "We recovered your damaged ships," Dr. Tanaka said. "We rescued your wounded warriors. We captured your escape pods." Calthrak felt his limbs tense. Captured Vorak were usually better off dead. Subject species often took their revenge on fallen warriors in terrible ways. "Watch what we did with them," Dr. Tanaka said. The images showed human medical teams treating Vorak wounded, surgeons repairing damaged armor, medics administering pain relief, humans, tiny and fragile, walking among giant warriors without fear, treating them with the same care they would show their own injured. In one video, a Vorak warrior regained consciousness on a medical bed. He immediately tried to attack, his combat instincts overriding everything else. The humans around him did not fight back. They simply restrained him gently, speaking in calm voices, waiting for him to understand that he was not in danger. In another video, captured Vorak were being held in what could only be described as comfortable quarters. They were given food suitable for their biology. They were allowed to communicate with each other. They were treated not as prisoners, but as guests who were not yet free to leave. "We have captured over 3,000 of your warriors," Dr. Tanaka said. "Not a single one has been harmed. Not a single one has been mistreated. They will be returned to you when this conflict is over, in the same condition we found them, better in some cases." Calthrak stared at the images. He did not understand what he was seeing. The Vorak never treated captured enemies this way. Subject species never treated captured Vorak this way. This was not how war worked. This was not how anything worked. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why would you do this?" "Because we are not your enemies. Supreme Commander, we never were. You came to our world intending to conquer us, to enslave us, to treat us the way you have treated 100 other species. And despite all that, we do not want to destroy you. We want to offer you something better." "What could you possibly offer us?" "A future," Dr. Tanaka said. "Not as conquerors but as partners. Not as masters but as equals. A galaxy where strength is not measured by how many species you can crush, but by how many you can uplift. Where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Where power is used to build rather than destroy." Calthrak's officers were watching him, waiting for his response. He could see the confusion on their faces. They did not know how to process this any more than he did. "You are asking us to abandon everything we believe," he said slowly. "Everything we have been for 3,000 years. I am asking you to become something better," Dr. Tanaka replied. "I know it seems impossible. I know your culture, your history, everything you have been taught says that the strong must rule. But that is not true. It was never true. The truly strong do not need to dominate. They choose to help, and if we refuse..." There was a pause before Dr. Tanaka answered. "Then we will fight, and we will win. Not because we want to destroy you, but because we will not allow you to destroy others." We will break your fleets. We will free your subject species. We will tear down everything the Dominion has built. And in the end, you will lose not just this war, but your entire way of life." Her voice softened slightly. "Or you can choose differently. Right now, today, you can be the first Vorak in 3,000 years to choose peace instead of conquest. You can be the beginning of something new." Kaltharak was silent for a long time. Around him, his officers shifted uncomfortably. They were warriors, trained for combat, not for philosophical debates about the nature of strength. They wanted orders. They wanted to fight. But Kaltharak was not just a warrior. He was Supreme Commander, responsible for the lives of millions, responsible for the future of his people. "Your fleet is surrounding my ships," he said finally. "You have us trapped. Why not simply destroy us and be done with it?" "Because that is not who we are," Dr. Tanaka said. "We do not want to kill you, Supreme Commander. We want to convince you. There is a difference, and if you cannot convince me, then we will disable your fleet and take you prisoner, and we will keep trying to convince you, for as long as it takes." Kaltharak let out a sound that might have been a laugh if Vorak were capable of laughter. "You are strange creatures, humans. You have defeated us, and yet you offer mercy. You have us at your mercy, and yet you ask for our cooperation. I do not understand you." "You do not need to understand us today," Dr. Tanaka replied. "You only need to decide whether you want to keep fighting a war you cannot win, or whether you are willing to try something new." The communication ended. Kaltharak stood on his bridge, surrounded by his officers, and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Somewhere behind him, a young officer spoke. "Supreme Commander, what do we do?" Kaltharak looked at the tactical display, at the human ships surrounding his battered fleet, at the blue planet that had proved so unexpectedly dangerous, at the future that waited for his decision. "Prepare a shuttle," he said finally. "I am going to meet with the humans again." His officers stared at him in shock, but none of them argued. None of them dared, because they too had seen the images. They too had seen their wounded warriors being treated with kindness by an enemy that had every reason to hate them. And they too were beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was another way. The shuttle crossed the empty space between the fleets. This time Kaltharak went alone. He was met at the airlock by Dr. Tanaka and a small human escort. She looked up at him without fear. "Thank you for coming, Supreme Commander." "I have not decided anything," Kaltharak said. "I have questions." "Then let us find answers together," Dr. Tanaka replied. She led him into the human ship, and for the first time in his long life, Kaltharak began to consider the possibility that everything he had believed might be wrong. The meeting lasted for 3 days. 3 days of talking, arguing, questioning, and slowly, gradually, understanding. Dr. Tanaka did not try to convince Kaltharak that the Vorak way was evil. She did not condemn 3,000 years of conquest and domination. Instead, she showed him another way of seeing the galaxy. She showed him the records of human history, the wars, the atrocities, the empires that had risen and fallen. Humans had been conquerors too. Once they had enslaved each other, slaughtered each other, treated the weak with the same cruelty the Vorak showed to subject species. "We are not so different," she told him. "We understand the temptation of power. We know what it feels like to believe that strength gives you the right to rule." "Then what changed?" Kaltharak asked. "We realized it did not work. Empires built on conquest always fall. The enslaved always rebelled. The dominated always remembered their chains. You cannot build a lasting civilization on fear. Eventually, the fear runs out, and then all you have left is enemies." She showed him something else too. She showed him Earth. Not the weapons, not the military might, but the world itself. Cities where billions of humans lived together in relative peace. Farms that fed entire continents. Schools where children learned about the universe. Hospitals where the sick were healed, regardless of their ability to pay. "We are not perfect," Dr. Tanaka admitted. "We still have wars, conflicts, injustice. But we are trying. Every generation we try to be a little better than the one before. That is what I am offering you. Not perfection, just progress." Kaltharak listened. He argued, he challenged everything she said. But somewhere in those 3 days, something inside him began to shift. He thought about the Dominion, about the tribute worlds that lived in constant fear, about the subject species who served only because the alternative was death. He had always told himself that this was natural, that this was how the universe worked. The strong ruled, the weak served. But now he wondered, was it natural, or was it just a choice that his ancestors had made, a choice that had become tradition, a tradition that had become law? If it was a choice, could a different choice be made? On the 3rd day, he asked the question that had been growing in his mind. "If I agreed to this peace you offer, what would happen to my people? We have ruled for 3,000 years. We do not know how to be anything else." Dr. Tanaka smiled slightly. "That is not true, Supreme Commander. Your people are not just conquerors. You are also builders, engineers, scientists. Your ships are works of art. Your cities are marvels of architecture. You have achieved things that most species only dream of. We achieve them through conquest, perhaps, but the skills you use to conquer could also be used to create, to protect, to help. The galaxy needs strength, Kaltharak. There are dangers out there that no single species can face alone. What if the Vorak became protectors instead of conquerors? What if your strength was used to defend the weak instead of exploit them? Kelthorak was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised even himself. I would like that. The announcement came for days after the battle. Supreme Commander Kelthorak, speaking on behalf of the Vorak fleet, declared a cessation of hostilities with humanity. More than that, he announced his intention to return to the Dominion and advocate for change. I have seen something here that I never expected, he said, his words broadcast across the galaxy. I have seen strength used with wisdom, power used with mercy. I have seen an enemy who chose to heal my warriors instead of killing them. I have been offered peace when I expected only war. His voice grew stronger. For 3,000 years, the Vorak have ruled through fear. I always believed this was our destiny, our purpose. I now believe it was our mistake. We are strong, but strength alone is not enough. True strength requires wisdom. True power requires mercy. Across the galaxy, billions watched in stunned silence. Ambassador Threll of the Pelia wept openly in the council chamber. Others stood frozen, unable to believe what they were hearing. I do not know if my people will accept what I am about to propose, Kelthorak continued, but I must try. The Vorak must become something new. Not conquerors, but protectors. Not masters, but partners. This is the lesson the humans have taught me. This is the future I will fight for. He paused, his eyes finding the camera that broadcast his image across the stars. To every species that has suffered under our rule, I say this, I am sorry. We were wrong. And if you will give us the chance, we will try to make it right. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Some were hostile, angry voices demanding that the Vorak pay for centuries of oppression, but many more were cautiously hopeful. Species that had lived in fear for generations dared to imagine a different future. On Earth, Dr. Tanaka watched the reactions with quiet satisfaction. General Chen stood beside her, his expression thoughtful. Do you think he really means it? The general asked. I think he wants to mean it, Dr. Tanaka replied. Whether he can convince his people is another question. Change like this does not happen overnight. It will take years, decades, maybe centuries, but it has started. Yes, it has started. She looked out the window at the stars that had seemed so threatening just days ago. Now they held the promise of something new, something better. History took a turn today, she said softly. The galaxy will never be the same. The months that followed were difficult but filled with hope. Kelthorak returned to the Dominion and faced fierce opposition. Many Vorak refused to accept his message. There were conflicts, challenges, even assassination attempts, but there were also those who listened, those who wondered, those who began to question traditions they had always accepted without thought. Humanity reached out to the galaxy, not as conquerors or saviors, but as partners. They shared technology, offered trade, built relationships with species that had never known anything but domination. They were not perfect, they made mistakes, but they kept trying. The subject species of the Dominion began to find their voices. Some demanded independence. Others sought partnership with the Vorak under new terms. The old order creaked and groaned, resisting change with all its strength. But change came anyway. Slowly, painfully, one decision at a time. 5 years after the Battle of Seoul, the Galactic Council met in formal session. For the first time in history, humanity had a seat at the table. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the Vorak representative was not there to demand tribute. Kelthorak, now known as Kelthorak the Changed, stood before the assembled delegates. Beside him stood Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her hair now completely gray, her eyes still sharp and determined. We come before you not as masters and servants, Kelthorak said, but as partners. The Dominion is no more. In its place, we offer the Galactic Alliance, a union of equals, a community of species working together for the good of all. The vote was not unanimous. It would never be unanimous, but it was enough. The alliance was born. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed. Wars still happened. Conflicts still arose. Progress was slow and often frustrating, but the direction had changed. The old cycle of conquest and domination was breaking. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had never seen before. Not the power to destroy, but the power to heal. Not the strength to conquer, but the strength to forgive. And the strongest species in the galaxy had learned the most important lesson of all. True strength was not about what you could destroy. It was about what you could build, on Earth. In a memorial garden built to honor those who had fallen in the Battle of Seoul, a simple stone marker bore an inscription. It read, "They came to conquer, they stayed to learn. They left as friends. May this be the future of all worlds." And for the first time in 3,000 years, the stars were not symbols of fear. They were symbols of hope. Dr. Tanaka visited the memorial on the 10th anniversary of the battle. She was old now, her body failing, but her mind was still sharp. She looked at the names carved in stone, humans and Vorak alike, and she smiled. "We did it," she whispered to no one in particular. "We actually did it." Somewhere above her, Beyond the blue sky and the atmosphere and the vastness of space, ships from a dozen species traveled the lanes between stars, not as conquerors or subjects, but as neighbors, as partners, as friends. History had taken a turn, and it would never turn back.